Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another ASUG affiliate webcast. My name is Karina Sherman, and I am a marketing coordinator here at ASUG headquarters. We have a really great program for you today, brought to you by NOAA Software, in which we'll learn how John Manville reduced SAP-related support calls by over 50% in 1 year and improved user performance with SAP software. A few housekeeping notes to keep in mind. All participants' lines are currently on mute. However, you can ask questions throughout the webcast. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A field in the panel on the right side of the WebEx screen. We will be doing a Q&A session at the end of the webcast, so make sure and get any questions in so we can answer as many as possible. If for some reason we are unable to answer all questions, today's webcast is being recorded, and NOAA Software, our webcast sponsor, will contact you to answer any unanswered questions post-webcast. Today's webcast recording and slides will be posted to ASUG's website, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to those materials. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's speakers. Sarah White, Director of Market Development, SAP North America Education. Sarah White has been in the software industry for the last 12 years and has held a myriad of positions as a trainer, solution engineer, account executive, portfolio manager, and most recently the Director of Market Development for SAP North America Education. In this role, Sarah is responsible for managing portfolio, marketing, communications, and enablement activities for SAP North America Education. Her mission is to bring software and solutions to SAP's customers to help them bring out the best from their people. Next, we have Jesse Bernal, Service Delivery Manager from John Manville. Jesse is responsible for leading a service excellence team of 30 employees. Jesse had been a leader in a multi-year implementation of a single service delivery organization for all North American plants and business units. He has been able to develop and implement a 4-year strategic plan for service management within IT. Jesse reports to the CIO at Johns Manville and helps provide leadership and guidance within the IT organization. Lastly, we have Ilya Epstein, Director of Pre-Sales Engineering at NOAA Software. Ilya has been helping with customers, helping them realize value from their enterprise applications for over a decade. He is currently the Director of Solutions Engineering, where he leads a team that helps customers develop user sustainment methodologies powered by NOAA's unique technology. Ilya works with customers globally to develop best practices that improve application adoption while decreasing the cost of end-user services. I'd now like to turn it over to our first presenter, Sarah White. Sarah?
Thank you, Karina. First and foremost, hello ASUG members. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to learn more about how to improve user satisfaction and also reduce support costs from your SAP environment. Before I pass control over to Jesse Bernal, one of our favorite customers, I wanted to just say a few words about our partnership with NOAA Software. As you may or may not know, SAP has a couple different levels of partnership that range all the way from one of our partners has a SAP certified solution all the way up to something called a solution extension partner. Solution extensions are actually key third-party offerings that are broadly applicable across SAP deployments. So every solution extension partner was actually chosen by SAP because their product or suite of products fill the need that our customers exhibit. NOAA in particular is the leading global provider of end-user experience management solutions. Because this filled a need in our SAP portfolio, we signed a Solutions Extensions partnership with NOAA in 2008. This partnership essentially means that SAP and NOAA have joint product strategy and solution roadmap. It means that all of the NOAA products, or SAP User Experience Management by NOAA, is tested to the very same product standards that we hold our own software to. It means that this software has a licensing model and that SAP provides maintenance, upgrade, and support. And in choosing our solution extensions partners, we also ensure that their software has a long-term return on investment. In addition to that, or since we established our partnership in 2008, we've had many, both large and small customers take advantage of the unique value that SAP User Experience Management brings to their SAP deployment. So at this time, I would like to pass the baton over to Jesse so he can talk to you a little bit more about the value that SAP UEM, as we like to call it, brought to Johns Manville. So Jesse, can you take it away?
Yes. So just a brief overview of Johns Manville. So Johns Manville has been around for over 150 years. We are in the manufacturing industry. So we manufacture insulation products as well as commercial roofing and some engineered products. So we are a manufacturer of building materials. This is just a real high level of where Johns Manville came from. So 1858, we actually started in New York, moved from New York to Denver, and we were acquired by Berkshire Hathaway in 2001. So we are part of the Berkshire Hathaway family. I want to do a really quick overview of our location so that you do have an understand that Johns Manville is not just in North America. We do have a presence also in Europe and Asia. We use SAP globally, so I want to make sure as I'm going through this, you know that Johns Manville does have a global footprint, and we do use this tool globally. So some real quick things on how Johns Manville used NOAA and really what we saw the value it brought to Johns Manville. So the first one was really identifying key areas of support. So being the service delivery manager, some of your organizations may call that the help desk, I am responsible to figure out how we can make those support needs go away, how we can make those support needs better. So NOAA really gives you the power to see all that detail when you want to understand what's going on in your support organization. It allows you to identify who needs to be trained, what users are actually having issues. So one of the key points here is in Solution Manager within SAP, and I know a lot of people use Solution Manager in Basis, you get a more high-level view of your enterprise. So Solution Manager does provide you that view of user experience, what T-codes are being used, but from a very high level across your entire enterprise. What NOAA gives you is kind of a view all the way down to individual users. You can compare user bases together. So we compare an hourly worker on the floor versus a salary worker in an office. We look at differences between different locations. So in the one map I went over, we have plants all over the U.S. So we also compare plant locations in divisions to each other. So similar plants that manufacture similar products, are their users using SAP the same? So NOAA gives you that benefit of being able to slice and dice to a very finite level to be able to understand who needs trained and what issues are occurring. It also helps us validate performance and issues. It really takes the noise out of some of the things that you hear in IT. So I'm sure many of you, since you've implemented SAP, probably dealt with noise from the business on, you know, everything that you've done in SAP has now broke our process. It takes us twice as long to do all of our work. So when we really use NOAA to look at those concerns, we're able to understand why those concerns were there and why people were saying those comments. What we saw at Johns Manville is we would implement SAP to 150 people in a location, but when you go back and look at NOAA, out of the 150, 12 or 13 are doing all the transactions. So the intent of SAP was to allow everyone to be doing transactions, but what happened is some of the smaller plants and locations deferred all the work back to the front office workers. So those people were overwhelmed with transactional work, but it wasn't the way we intended SAP to be used. So there was some training that needed to be done on how do you defer some of the work out. Shortens our time to really bring up the competency and improve people around the application. So again, we use NOAA to really drive any enhancement or change. We take a snapshot of what did the performance look prior, and then what did the performance look after. So really using the charts and graphs on performance of people against T codes. So if we made an improvement to a T code, do we actually see reduction in the amount of errors? Do we see reduction in the amount of time they're spending in the transaction? It really gives us validity on the Z T codes that we're creating are working, or if we're putting an enhancement pack that things are actually becoming better. We also were able to use the data to provide metrics and improvements for enhancements, and also provide metrics for exact performance for each desktop. So with NOAA, it's actually, you know, kind of a listener that sits on the desktop that you can see what people are doing transactionally, and it really gives you performance from user to user. It doesn't put them all together and just say, here's the health of your SAP enterprise. I can start to look at, is it a network issue in a certain plant? Is it a computer issue with a certain user? Because not all performance issues that we see are necessarily because of our system performance. It could be network, it could be age of machine, it could be someone working off a VPN with a home network that's causing impact. So this really gives us a lot of that data to really understand when people are complaining, is it valid and why, and how can we get to that root cause. So really what this has allowed service delivery to do is we're really trying to change to be more proactive and not a reactive service delivery organization. So we want to get to a point where right now we're working to connect NOAA to our service management tool to be able to auto-generate tickets based off of certain errors or events that NOAA sees within our system. So without the user ever calling, the system can put a ticket in for us, notify us that a user's having a problem, and we can get back to that user with how to fix the issue without them ever picking up the phone. So we're really trying to be more proactive and not react to issues. Again, very, very high level on NOAA. If some of you are looking at this product or have the product currently, you will see it's a total application coverage for all end user perspectives. So it does monitor performance across the entire landscape. At Johns Manville, we do use this in APO, SCM, our PI, our portal. We have a dev, test, and QA environment that we monitor all of those. So we do have NOAA running against pretty much everything we use SAP on. So SRM, portal, SCM, APO, ECC, we're monitoring everything in test, dev, and QA. Automated discovery, so it does discover what users are in SAP. We actually force this through SCCM, so it's actually a required install on everyone's machine that has SAP GUI installed. It's a silent push that if someone tries to remove it, it does actually try to push it back out to that user. So we do use this across all of our locations. It's transparent, so NOAA collects data in the background. Users really don't see anything going on. It's really using the SAP tools itself to really monitor what's happening. There's nothing that the user has to interact with when it comes to NOAA. It's all in the background. We also did a pilot to ensure that NOAA did not impact our network traffic or performance. So when we rolled out, we started with a small location, all users, but we wanted to ensure network speed, performance of the tool was not impacted by NOAA. So we did do validation of that before we rolled it out across all of our locations. This is a view when we first started to use NOAA. So this is actually a few years old, but it was a very powerful message. So our CIO, who I work for, we installed NOAA, we, got users up. You can see there wasn't a lot of users in there just yet, 39, 21. You can see the user count was pretty low. But what our CIO was very quickly able to see is that we had one module with 8 users that was causing 65% of the errors. So it also gave us validation of where are we spending time in support, where are most users impacting issues. We saw immediately warehouse and shipping, which is very high transactional for us. the most errors with 17 users. So again, this was real quick after we implemented. This was some of the first data we saw, which helps validate where problems were occurring. So we probably weren't spending enough time on QE11. We tended to spend more of our time in the warehouse shipping and customer operations area. You can see quality was number 2, but in reality, to train 8 users to improve the use of QE11, we could reduce our error percentage of 65%. So very quickly, you can get some quantitative response back from your NOAA data. Again, this is just a view, a more detailed view. So you can see here that we have a user with specific QE11, what's occurring, how many errors is this user running into. So again, what we found with this specific user is this user was working 3rd shift. There was no one there who really did a great job of training the user, and the way he was trying to make the system work was try the same thing over and over and over and over again, which obviously it wasn't working, right? So there was the quality UD was being rejected. He didn't know how to close the UD, but because of this, we were able to go to that user and provide training on what he needed to do this transaction correctly. Now, again, worked on 3rd shift. When we showed this to the supervisor didn't know the user was even having issues. They would do their work. Whatever didn't work in SAP, they'd leave for the next shift, and then the next shift would come in and pick up all the work that didn't get done by the previous shift. So it was really, helping identify where these issues and items were occurring. Again, this is high-level module and business process states. So one of the benefits that you get of NOAA is you can start to group transactions together to really define what your business processes are. So there's other tools in SAP that do the same, similar items, but what this allows you to do is to monitor an entire business process in totality. So we could monitor the order entry process. And we actually did that here at Johns Manville. So we were validating, should we use some of the automation tools that SAP provides to help automate some of the order entry processing. So we were able to look at the VAO1, VAO2, VAO3, all these different processes in customer service, and really identify what key areas in customer service do we need to enhance or improve, and do we want to invest money in another tool that SAP provides, or do we need to do some custom improvements through ABAP? So it really helped us understand the problem, as well as to validate a pilot using some SAP tools on was there actual improvement with the pilot, or was everything really the same net-net. So some lessons learned, right? So in IT support, we were able to shorten the length and quantity of phone calls and reduce the callbacks. And I have some data that I'm going to show you after this slide. We were able to reduce the quantity of emails. So just to give you a high-level overview, so right after SAP, we were dealing with about 3,000 phone calls and emails a day. So we had about 3,000 issues coming in across all the different locations. So when we looked at that volume, and with a staff of 30, how do we ever become proactive when we're dealing with so many issues every day? We use NOAA to diagnose and also replicate issues to help resolve things a lot faster. So instead of a new user on SAP who couldn't describe things to us, we're able to get into NOAA and use the support buckets to be able to go, okay, the user was actually NVL02N, not VT02N. They actually were stuck on this transaction or keystroke, not the one they actually described. So it definitely helped us get through that a lot quicker. The proactive I talked about a little bit, and also reducing the risk of change management. So when we look at changes going into SAP, some of the things that we were able to do, and I'm going to use an example, MB51, any of the MB transactions, MCMA, any of those transactions, there's some things that have changed through the enhancement packs, where SAP is trying to drive out the use of like MB1A and go more to the MIGO GRTR, the MIGO transactions. So we were able to go in and start to look for who's all using MB1A, who's all using MB1B, and start to educate them on, we need you to stop using the old transaction and go to the ECC new transactions, and get them to start using Amigo TR and GI, and help them understand those screens, so that as we see SAP with these enhancement packs that we keep putting in, changes that SAP stopping, improvements and enhancements to those old transactions. We want our users to be using new transactions. We're able to key in and identify very specific users and very specific locations of who needs trained on these new transactions to help, reduce impact from change. And then also training, we use this to target the training. So kind of what I was just describing. So really targeting training to those exact users who needs trained. So instead of going to a plant or a business unit and saying, I'm going to make a change to your shipping transaction, VT02N, I need to know who I'm training in your location. We can just go pull a report and find out what users are using VT02N in that location, and only train the ones that touch that transaction. What tends to occur when we would go to the business, they would give us a list of 35 people, and we'd find out only 3 are doing the transaction. So it would waste both their users' time as well as our trainers' time to really go through that exercise where I really only need to focus with 3 people, not 35, and I can get that training done in a day instead of a week. So really helps see what we need to do there specifically. So benefits, how did we measure success? Call volume reduction, improvement in utilization, reduction in system and user errors, which you could kind of hear what I was going through and describing. The business process and focus on cycle time. So we really did a lot of pushing on cycle times of processing and how quickly we could get through those different business processes. So how did we justify if training worked? So I'm going to show you some things here in NOAA where there's a baseline that gets created. So we look at baseline improvements that are measurable. So if I go to a location and I train them on something new, I should see improvements or reduction in errors in NOAA. If I'm not seeing a reduction in errors or an increase of usage, then obviously the training either wasn't understood, the users that we trained weren't the right users. So it really gives you, validity and some data to really drive, is the training you're providing to the business actually helping improve anything? Error reduction was very important as well. So, ROI on training, some of the things that we're doing, which we actually got from another customer that is using NOAA in our new version. So we were on the old version, and now we're going to the very newest version of NOAA. We're adding some user attributes that categorize people as salary versus hourly, and then we put an average, basically average salary, average cost based on employee group, so that we can start to get some dollar benefits back. Now, obviously, we're not returning those dollars back to the business, but we have the data to be able to go back to those business leaders and say, because we made these changes, here's what the ROI would be based on productivity costs. So we're giving that productivity back to you, the business, to do something else with, but that's the dollars we're giving back to the business. Now, it's not real dollars, but it's definitely a number that senior staff and them listen to. So this is a graph of 2013, so it's 2012 compared to 2013. We have actually been on NOAA since 2011, so this is about our 3rd year into NOAA. So we started to track in 2012, how is NOAA helping improve and how are we reducing costs, really focusing on these things. So one thing that I want to describe, and you'll see a spike here that occurred. So we always do our enhancement packs in February. So when SAP releases an enhancement pack, we actually do those in February. And what you would see the first time we did our enhancement pack in February, we actually had a spike in support the month after. Using some of the data that we got from that first experience, what tests needed to be run, what were the impacts, what did we not look at, we're able to reduce enhancement pack. So we increase support because we know we're changing things with enhancement pack, but we're actually able to drive down the support instead of seeing a spike up, using some of the NOAA data to be more proactive on fixing things so that the March impact was reduced versus the March impact that was the year prior. We just did the enhancement pack again. We saw similar things, but last month in January, our call volume was up just above 100. So it was more than December, but that was because we're still going through some of the things that we're testing in enhancement pack. People are calling, they're validating things in QA. So I would assume I'll see a similar trend, but not nearly as high as the spike was in 2012. You will see where we've reduced our call volume all the way down to, in December, we had 41 calls on SAP. So if you remember when we went live in SAP, which was back in started 2008, 2011, if I would have had the graph on here, our call volume was above the 1,000 mark. So we were, like I said, 3,000 issues a month when we first took over service delivery. So really focused on driving the 3,000 to other support channels and really driving the call volume down using NOAA to help get there. This is an example of the baseline. So as I talked to you about the quality items, this is baseline items that are there. So what you'll see here is we have, versus the user errors, system errors from when we went out from a baseline versus improvement and reduction in errors. So this is a view that we use for our training, right? So our training dashboard is, okay, we went and trained on the billing process. After training, did it get better or did it get worse on user errors? So really it helps us bring that data back, and we look at those things to ensure that when we're training, this data is helping drive decisions within JM. You can also see in NOAA you can be very specific on days, last 30 days, last 7 days. What do you want to look at specifically? I'm looking at production, but we could also look at QA, test, dev, SCM, PI. We can look at myriad of different items. So, performance for responses measured uniquely for each desktop by agent. We have a unique KPI for users for that user workflow tied to real-time analytics. And then obviously automation, no scripting, even for the custom transactions. So what that is really saying is any ZT code, anything that you are doing in SAP, NOAA will pick up. There's no custom, go in and now you have to add T codes once you add them. NOAA's just watching everything that's occurring, and it's sending that all back for evaluation and monitoring. So there's no special things you have to do to capture everything. I think what you will see, and I think if people use NOAA right now, you probably see this, when you turn NOAA on, the thing that you're going to deal with the most with NOAA is implementation is easy and quick. It's after the implementation where the work occurs. So it's getting through all this error, understanding the data, breaking it down into business processes, filtering through the errors. What do you want to look at? What do you want to ignore? It's really all of that filtering that takes the time. And again, no back-end integration is required for this to occur. So measurement of success for training, so application manager, which this is a higher view. You'll see this is more recent, more recent, where you can see some of our divisions and things. So you'll see more users in the tool from the first one I showed you, but again, gives us that high-level monitor of how is our application doing by division and business unit, how many users are we seeing in there, how many active users, how many errors. So it's really giving us a view across divisions, modules, business processes, which ones are really leading the way. So again, you saw in that first one, I had warehouse shipping as #1, but as we've seen through time, as we added more customer advocates in, sales order management has become #1 in use, and then we go to warehouse shipping, sales order creation, finance, cash applications. So you can kind of see how these things keep changing based on users and experience. So this is a business process we built. So I talked about warehouse management a little bit. This is basically linking these things together. So VT02N, VL02N, VL06P, LT12, LT03. We use these items in our shipping process, and we monitor them as a process together. Now, the cool thing about NOAA is I can go, show me the business process performance for Jacksonville. Show me the business performance for shipping in Waterville. So is it the same? Is there the same amount of users? Is the activity the same? Where do we see the most issues or problems? So as an example here, if VT02N is occurring the most errors, what we did at JM was focus our development on these T codes. So If it's user errors, why are the user's errors occurring? You can see it wasn't really system error. So if it's user errors occurring in VT02N, what can we do to reduce those user errors in VT02N? I shouldn't be focusing in VL06P, pretty low, right? You can see LT03, this was about 518 here, but I'm going to get the bigger impact if I reduce the errors that are occurring in VT02N. So really driving into a business process, which T code should I focus on to impact that business process the most? So that's really what we use to help measure, the success of business there. So I believe I'm going to pass this over to Ilya next. And Ilya is going to do a demo here. So let me pass the ball here to Ilya.
Thank you, Jesse, for this wonderful presentation. And I'm just going to share my desktop. Once again, welcome the ASUG audience, and thank you so much, Jesse, for this great success story. So today what we want to do is we want to take a look at the actual product and show you how it's used by the user support teams, by service delivery, as well as other sustainment groups within companies to help drive user support costs down while improving the overall user experience and satisfaction. So the first thing I want to take a look at is the unique ability by NOAA to capture every error message that the user experiences within the SAP application. Now, you will see here this is a dashboard representing 2 weeks of data, and we're looking across your entire SAP application space, including ERP systems, as well as portal, even BI tools. And you can see here we're breaking down the user errors by each individual component, by each transaction, by each screen. One of the questions I saw actually in the panel was, does this work with standard transactions or custom? And there's absolute auto-discovery with our tool. So you never have to pre-script, you never have to define your application landscape. We will pick up all of the transactions out of the box. In fact, you can see here, the highest level of errors in this example is actually by a custom transaction, within a custom transaction. Now, in terms of the error messages, for the first time, you have the ability proactively, without the users notifying your support desk, to actually see all of the most common errors they're experiencing. And if you look at some of the examples, right, some of them are pretty simple, fill in all required entry fields, simple training issues that are taking time because they're happening hundreds of times by many users. We have, incorrect data entry. The user is navigating the transaction, but they're not putting the right fields. It could also be usability challenge, right? Maybe the screen is not designed for optimal input. You could pick up work stopping issues like authorization issues, right? We talked about the fact that users are often not provisioned properly from day one, and sometimes it takes a long time to get them set up so that they could perform their functions. An authorization issue is a real work-stopping problem that can really slow down the user. We could also pick up master data issues, things like material not defined. The user is trying to execute a sales order, but he cannot do it because the data, the materials were not properly set up in a specific plant or an organization. And again, all of this visibility comes out of the box without the users reporting the problem. Now, if you look on the right side, because we're monitoring individual end users, you could break down, like Jesse mentioned, all of this data by various attributes. So, for example, site, department, manager, role, all of this metadata about the end users become automatic analytics and become and drive the ability to target remediation for the most effective ROI. So, for example, let's go back to these authorization issues, and I see a pie chart like this broken down by my locations. And I have limited resources in terms of training or various sustainment activities. I don't need to focus on all of the organizations. I'm going to look at my biggest opportunities, so if I focus on 1, 2, 3, 4 locations, I could cover 75% of my errors. I could also go a little bit deeper. I could actually look at the individual end users. So, for example, the black line here represents the baseline. So, Jesse talked about, who do you train? Who do you go after? right? If you do a standard survey or if you do, manual type of assessments, a lot of times you don't get that objectivity. With NOAA, you're actually able to get detailed insight as to specific users that could benefit from whatever the remediation strategy may be, whether it's better training, whether it's better self-help content, whether it's better context-sensitive help. All of that improvement can be driven by quantifiable metrics. Now, if you want to go a little bit deeper, let's say I want to look at some of the errors that a user is experiencing. The solution is designed to be really easy to investigate and go deeper with just a click. Everything you're seeing here is being delivered through business objects, but you do not need to be a business objects expert to gain value from the solution. Just clicking and drilling down will expose more and more data so you can actually work on remediation. So for example, here, very quickly, I'm able to drill down, see which applications are being impacted, which specific transactions, what specific user, even some environmental information like the computer name. I could see the exact error message the user is getting. We talk about support tickets, right? Studies out there by Gardner and Forrester, they talk about that, 90% of support tickets do not contain enough information to start immediate remediation. It takes 6 to 8 iterations between the support staff and the user just to understand what the problem is so that they could start investigating and remediating the problem. With our solution, the exact error message that the user received is captured, and we could see statistics. How often is the user getting this error? Is this happening just one time, or is it happening across all users? All of that can be revealed from the NOAA data. Now, if you want to go a little bit deeper, and let's say I'm actually in the support desk and I want to investigate one of these incidents, with a click of a button, I could drill down to what's called the user workflow. And the user workflow, when you put this in front of the support teams, the functional support teams, this enables you to shorten the remediation and investigation time of a support incident because it captures everything the user is doing with an application step by step from the moment they logged in until they logged out. So you have the application, you have the transactions, you have the screens, you know how long the user stayed on each screen. And it's complete history, chronological, step by step. So for example, we talked about the user here. He actually was doing something in material management, and he got an error because he doesn't have a permission in V02 to change a sales order. You're able to know about this, and you know the full context. You know the time the error has occurred, the screen it occurred on, the transaction, what did the user do that led up to the error. And you could actually see this is a pretty frustrated user because, like Jesse talked about, this is not a one-time event. This user is having this issue over and over and over again. So there's two parts that are really used by the support teams in terms of helping the end users. You have this workflow, which helps you really in the lifetime of the incident. And by the way, you could navigate to this workflow directly. You don't need to drill down from the dashboard. You could actually access individual user workflows automatically. You just need to know the username and the date, and you could pull up the workflow for any user that reports a support incident. So by having a workflow like this, you're able to reduce the call handle time. You're able to reduce the mean time to resolution. You're able to reduce the user frustration because the user doesn't have to repeat his experience over and over again. You have most of the information you need to be able to help the user right away. But then, even more importantly, you have the analytics, the aggregations that are looking at most common errors, most common issues, right? What are your top 20 transactions that you should focus on in terms of that continuous improvement, right? There's a direct correlation. What we found from our customers is that there's a direct correlation between these user errors that are happening in these transactions and the number of support tickets that they're opening up. So the better you could improve that proactive remediation through all of your sustainment activities, the better the impact in terms of reducing the cost of support services. One other area I want to talk about is the response time of the system, because that's usually another area where you have a lot of support issues that are typically hard to investigate because there's a lot of subjectivity that is associated with, response times and support issues. Now, what's unique about NOAA is that when we talk about the response time, we're talking about an end-to-end response time from an end-user perspective. So for example, when I clicked on this operations tab, and you saw it took a few seconds to get the result set, what NOAA measures is that end-to-end response time from the moment I clicked on that tab until all of the data came back, and I'm actually able to use this dashboard and navigate. That's our cumulative end-to-end response time. So what this does is it eliminates subjectivity. It gives you a complete perspective. Is this a real response issue or not? So this is not an APM-style metric which is focusing on individual components like the query time or the network time or the database time. This is the true user experience. Now, we do this, we capture this response time for every operation, every button that is being pressed within every screen, within every transaction. Now, the beauty of the system is because we're doing this for all users in your environment, this is production user monitoring, I could start to assess the impact of a specific response issue. Now, you could see these arrows, the red arrows pointing negatively up, which means that over a 2-week period, the last 2 weeks of April versus the first 2 weeks of April, I actually had a degradation in terms of the response time. Now, but if I look at my users or the operations, if I scroll down all the way to the bottom, I'm going to see a lot of operations which have a pretty negative response time. Maybe I did an upgrade and things didn't work out as well, but it's one user executing the operation maybe one time over a 2-week period. I'm not going to focus my time on this. With our solution, because you have visibility into the number of users that are being impacted and the number of operations that are being executed, you have the ability for the first time to prioritize remediation when it comes to response incidents. And then if you look at the bottom here, because we have those user attributes, we have information, for example, like site. So very quickly you could start seeing, let's say you have one SAP instance, and you're seeing this huge disparity in terms of the response time. One location and 2 desktops have a much higher response time than everyone else. Then you could actually have a common dialogue with the infrastructure team and get to the root cause analysis much faster, because this is likely to be a desktop issue or an infrastructure problem as opposed to an SAP system. And Jesse talked about that, being able to really pinpoint, where the potential problem is. The last thing I want to show you is Jesse talked about the ability to not only look at the NOAA data from a transaction or screen perspective, but to take this one level higher, being able to look at the data for an end-to-end business process. So one of the features that SAP UEM has is the ability to group all of your transactions into an end-to-end business process. So for example, we talked about sales order. So I could look at all of my end user KPIs, like the active time or the response time or the system and user errors for that end-to-end business process. And let's pick one that has actually a lot of negative data. For example, financial accounting, right? Most of you, I'm sure, are running SAP for, finance. And you want to be able to look over a 2-week period, has my adoption gone up? Has it improved, or has it gone down? So here we could actually see a decrease in usage of SAP financial processes. Now, the beauty of the solution is because you could compare 2 periods, you could compare 2 periods even for cyclical transactions. So, financial accounting, maybe only relevant month end or quarter end. That's great. You could actually compare 2 month ends or 2 quarter ends to make sure that you're looking at the 2 similar periods. Now, what I'm seeing here is the adoption is dropping. What I'm also seeing is the response is going up. And a lot of times we're seeing this type of correlation. The system is becoming a little slower, so the users are spending less time in the system. Or they're finding some workarounds. And maybe they're doing things a little bit more manually. Maybe they're using Excel more than they should. I also see here an increase of user errors. There's also a lot of times a correlation. You do an upgrade, you do an improvement, the user errors spike up, and that's causing the users not to use the system, not to spend enough time. And there's a direct impact to business, because if you're not, especially during month end and quarter end, you're not spending enough time putting in those entries, you're going to potentially have a delay in that month, in that filing, in the month end or quarter end analysis. Now, because we are grouping these transactions as part of that financial accounting process, if I want to determine where I should focus my remediation, which components of financial accounting have been negatively impacted. With a click of a button, I could get this perspective. And we're using a lot of heat maps in our new product. Jesse talked about upgrading to the new version. Part of the key value of this is we're using a lot of analytics and a lot of the business objects visual reporting. Because with a dashboard like this, very quickly I could see, the size of the box here represents the active time users are spending within the financial accounting process and the various transactions within financial accounting. The intensity of the color, the darker it is where you have the highest number of user errors. So imagine a world before SAP UEM. You would probably, if you were tasked to improve the financial accounting process, you would probably focus a lot of your remediation on these big boxes. But that's not where the end users are struggling. With SAP UEM, you can actually see that F22 transaction is where users are having 90% of their errors. Not only that, if I look at the right side, at the screens, there are only 2 screens that have the highest number of user errors. So just being able to address the errors on those 2 screens, whether it's through better training, maybe it's self-help content through WPB, maybe it's through usability improvements, maybe you want to use personas to improve those screens, that will get you the biggest return for your investment. And at the bottom, when you look at the users, that actually may tell you a different story. In this case, actually, it's not a problem with usability across all users. It's really just 1 or 2 users that are having a lot of errors. So maybe here it's an opportunity for microlearning. Maybe it's an opportunity to do, increase the number of super user time for that end user. So whatever remediations you want to do in user sustainment, whether it's better training, better self-help content, better usability improvements, to drive down the cost of support, you could leverage the NOAA data to tell you objectively if it's a problem, how many users are being impacted, what areas of the application are being impacted, so you could make smart decisions. So this concludes the demo part of the presentation. I hope this was helpful, and I'm going to pass it back to the ASUG team actually for some Q&A.